The galaxy had known peace for 17 million years, not the peaceful kind that came from happiness or friendship, but the peace that came from fear. The aura made sure of that. They were giants among the stars, beings of crystal and light who could destroy a world with a thought. Their empire stretched across 40,000 star systems, and every single one bowed before them. The aura didn't ask for loyalty. They took it. With their minds, they could reach into any being and twist their thoughts until obedience was the only option left. Supreme Overlord sat on the eternal throne at the center of the galaxy. He was old beyond measure, his crystalline body glowing with power that had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. Around him, the great hall stretched into darkness, filled with representatives from 1,000 conquered species. Each one knew their place in the great chain. They stood at attention near the walls, their four arms crossed over their massive chests. They were warriors, bred and broken for battle. Next came the silver-skinned, who managed the bureaucracy of the empire. Below them, the tiny around maintaining the technology that kept everything running. And far, far below, countless other species served in roles the aura had assigned them millions of years ago. Nobody questioned the chain. Nobody dared. "My lord," an administrator approached the throne, his movements careful and precise. "The outer rim scanners have detected something unusual." Barely moved, his voice echoed through the hall without him opening what might have been a mouth. "Define unusual." "A fleet, my lord, 57 vessels. They emerged from the Perseus Arm, from a region we have not yet." "And you disturb me for this." Voice carried a hint of displeasure that made every being in the hall flinch. "Send the subjugation fleet. Have them evaluated and assigned their role." "Yes, my lord. However, there is something else. These beings built their vessels without our technology. They developed faster-than-light travel independently." Now paid attention. In 17 million years, only the aura had achieved such a feat alone. Every other species had been given the stars by their masters or had stolen scraps of technology from ancient ruins. Interesting. Perhaps they will serve as scientists or engineers. Send commander with the evaluation team. The bowed and left, returned his attention to the endless reports from across his empire, already forgetting about the newcomers. Commander was a veteran of 10,000 conquests. His crystalline form bore the scars of the few species foolish enough to resist, though those marks were more like badges of honor than wounds. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the primitive vessels on his screens. "Pathetic," he muttered. "They use fusion drives, kinetic weapons. They might as well be throwing rocks." His second officer, a younger aura named, studied the readings. "Their ships are heavily armored for their level of technology, and those weapons, while primitive, appear to be extremely powerful for kinetic devices." "It matters little. Begin the standard protocol." The aura fleet moved into position, surrounding the human vessels. Opened a communication channel that would translate his words into whatever language these creatures spoke. He had given this speech so many times he could recite it in his sleep. "Attention, unknown vessels. You have entered territory claimed by the aura ascendancy. By the laws of the Great Chain, you will submit to evaluation. You will be assigned your role in the empire based on your capabilities. Resistance is futile. Cooperation will be rewarded. Defiance will result in extinction. You have one of your planetary rotations to respond." The response came back in less than a minute. A single word that needed no translation. "No." Stared at the communication console. In 10,000 conquests, he had never received such a response. Species begged. They negotiated. They tried to buy time. They never just said no. "Perhaps their translator is malfunctioning," suggested. "Scan them. Show me what we're dealing with." The scanners painted a picture of a bizarre species. They were small, fragile creatures made of soft flesh. They lived barely 100 of their years. Their home planet was a water world in an unremarkable system. They called themselves humans. "They're nothing," said, "weak, short-lived. Send the subjugation pulse. We'll break their minds and sort this out." The Aura ships unleashed their primary weapon. Psychic energy rolled across space, invisible but devastating. It was the power that had conquered the galaxy, the ability to reach into a mind and crush all resistance. Entire fleets had surrendered the moment they felt its touch. Whole planets had knelt without firing a shot. The human ships kept coming. "Impossible," whispered. "They should be catatonic. The pulse should have shattered their minds." Tried again, pouring more power into the attack. The psychic wave could have broken the will of millions. The human fleet didn't even slow down. "They're firing," someone shouted. The primitive kinetic weapons tore through space. The Aura had shields, of course, energy barriers that could stop most attacks. But these weren't most attacks. The human weapons hit with such force that shields flickered and died. Chunks of metal traveling at impossible speeds punched through hulls designed to withstand energy weapons. "Evasive maneuvers," ordered, "return fire." The battle was chaos. The Aura ships were faster and more maneuverable, but the humans fought with a ferocity that shocked everyone. When their shields failed, they kept fighting. When their weapons were destroyed, they rammed their ships into Aura vessels. When their hulls were breached, small figures in suits of armor continued to fire handheld weapons until the void took them. Watched one human ship lose its entire engine section. It should have been dead in space. Instead, it used emergency thrusters to position itself in the path of an Aura cruiser and detonated its reactor. Both ships vanished in a ball of plasma. "What are these creatures?" he breathed. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, had lost 12 ships. The humans had lost 32. By all logical measures, the Aura had won. But as looked at his casualties, at the damage to his fleet, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. He sent his report to the Eternal Throne, read it 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. Psychic attacks had no effect. The humans fought to the death. They had inflicted casualties on an Aura fleet. "Assemble a war fleet," the Supreme Overlord commanded. 300 ships. I want these humans crushed. Make an example of them." But even as he gave the order, a message spread through the great chain. It traveled from the warriors to the administrators to the workers. It passed between species in whispers and encrypted transmissions. There was a species that couldn't be dominated, a species that said no and meant it, a species that made the Aura bleed. On a military station, a soldier named heard the news. He looked at his 4 hands, hands that had killed for the Aura for 30 years. He had never questioned his service because questioning was impossible. The psychic conditioning made sure of that. But now he wondered, if these humans could resist, what did that mean? Were they stronger than the Aura, or was there something else, something had never considered? What if the Aura weren't invincible? Deep in a maintenance tunnel, a worker named heard the rumors. She had spent her entire life repairing the machines that kept the Empire running. She had never thought about what those machines were for, never questioned why her people served. The conditioning made sure of that. But now she paused, her 6 hands hovering over a power conduit. What would happen if she just stopped working? What if all the just stopped? The humans didn't know it yet, but they had done something no species had managed in 17 million years. They had planted a seed of doubt in the great chain, and doubt, once it took root, was impossible to remove. The human fleet limped back toward their territory, trailing debris and leaking atmosphere. On the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, Admiral reviewed the casualty reports. 32 ships lost, over 15,000 dead. They had faced an enemy beyond their understanding and survived, but the cost had been terrible. "Ma'am," her communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving thousands of transmissions from all over the galaxy, species we've never heard of. They're asking if the rumors are true, if we really fought the Aura and lived." stared at the star field ahead. They had come out here looking for new worlds, new resources, maybe new friends. Instead, they had stumbled into an empire that thought it owned the galaxy, an empire that had demanded humanity kneel. "Send a message to Earth," she said. "Tell them we need reinforcements. Tell them we're at war, and tell them that we're not backing down." "Yes, ma'am. What should we tell all these other species?" Thought about the beings who had lived under Aura rule for millions of years, species that had forgotten what freedom meant. She thought about the choice every human understood from birth, the choice to stand up and fight even when the odds were impossible. Tell them the truth. Tell them that humanity doesn't kneel. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen next. The war fleet assembled at Prime was the largest military force mobilized in 1,000 years. 300 ships, each one crewed by Aura warriors who had never known defeat. They gathered around the eternal throne like a swarm of crystalline death, their hulls gleaming with weapons that could crack planets. Himself would lead them. The Supreme Overlord had not taken the field in centuries, but these humans had done the impossible. They had to be crushed absolutely. They're reduced to atoms. The entire galaxy needed to see what happened to species that refused the Great Chain. "My lord," approached the throne. She had been promoted after failure. "The fleet is ready. We have calculated the location of the human. They call it Earth. Then we depart immediately. I want every species watching. I want them to see what defiance brings." The fleet moved through hyperspace, crossing the galaxy in days, stood on the bridge of his flagship, feeling the psychic presence of his commanders like a vast net of power. Together, they were invincible. These humans, whatever trick they had used to resist psychic attacks, would learn that raw power always prevailed in the end. They emerged into the Sol system and found it fortified. The humans had used the time well. Defensive platforms floated around Earth, bristling with weapons. A fleet of 200 ships formed a defensive perimeter. They were outnumbered but they didn't retreat. "Foolish," said. "Do they think their primitive weapons can stop us? Begin the assault." The Aura fleet surged forward. The humans opened fire immediately, not bothering with warnings or negotiations. Kinetic rounds and missiles filled the space between fleets. The Aura shields held against the first wave, then the second. But the humans kept firing, kept adjusting their aim, kept finding weak points. Tried to understand their tactics. The humans fought in small groups, each ship supporting the others. They communicated through encrypted channels rather than psychic links, making their strategy impossible to predict. When one group was damaged, another moved to cover them. When the Aura concentrated fire, the humans scattered and reformed elsewhere. It was like fighting smoke. "They're using guerrilla tactics," reported. "Hit-and-run attacks. They're trying to wear us down. Then we'll stop chasing them. All ships full assault on Earth itself. Ignore the fleet. We'll break their home and their spirit together." The Aura fleet pushed through, taking losses but maintaining formation. The human ships harassed them constantly, but couldn't stop the advance. Could see Earth growing larger on the screens, a blue and white marble that would soon be dust. "My lord," someone called out. "We're detecting massive energy signatures across the system. Jupiter, Saturn, the asteroid belt, everywhere." "What kind of signatures?" The answer came in fire. Weapons platforms the humans had hidden across the entire system activated simultaneously. They had been disguised as asteroids, as orbital debris, as anything except what they were. Now they revealed themselves and opened fire. The Aura fleet found itself caught in a crossfire. Kinetic rounds came from every direction. Nuclear weapons detonated in clusters, their primitive but effective fury ripping through shields already weakened by constant bombardment. The humans had turned their entire home system into a trap. Shields flickered under the assault. He reached out with his mind, trying to dominate the humans, trying to make them stop. He poured enough psychic power to enslave 1 billion beings into the attack. The humans kept fighting. "Why," he roared, "why can't I touch their minds?" On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral felt something brush against her thoughts. It was like a whisper in a language she didn't understand, or a pressure that wasn't quite there. She ignored it and focused on the tactical display. "All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship. Hit it with everything we have." The human fleet converged on its position. The Aura Supreme Overlord found himself surrounded by enemies he couldn't control, fighting with a determination he couldn't break. His shields collapsed. Weapons fire tore through his hull. "My lord, we must retreat," shouted. Stared at Earth, still intact, still defiant. He had lost over 100 ships, a third of his fleet destroyed by beings that shouldn't have been able to resist at all. The impossible had happened again. "Retreat," he whispered. Then louder, "All ships retreat to hyperspace." The Aura fleet fled. The humans pursued them to the edge of the system, then stopped. They had won, but at terrible cost. Another 100 ships destroyed. 60,000 more dead. Earth's orbit was a graveyard of human and Aura vessels alike. But Earth still stood, and the message went out across the galaxy at the speed of light. The Aura had retreated. The invincible Supreme Overlord had fled from battle. On the military station, heard the news and made a decision. He had wondered if the Aura were truly invincible. Now he knew they weren't. He gathered his squad mates and spoke words that felt strange in his mouth. "What if we stopped fighting for them? What if we fought for ourselves?" The psychic conditioning pushed back, trying to make him submit. But the thought was there now, and it wouldn't go away. In maintenance tunnels across the Empire, workers whispered similar questions. On administrative stations, bureaucrats looked at their endless reports and wondered what would happen if they just stopped filing them. The Great Chain, forged over 17 million years, began to develop cracks. Humanity didn't know what they had started. They were too busy mourning their dead and repairing their ships. Admiral stood in front of a wall of names, thousands of people who had died defending Earth. She placed her hand against the cold metal and made a promise. "We'll make it count. Whatever happens next, we'll make sure you didn't die for nothing." Behind her, the communication officer approached nervously. "Ma'am, we're receiving more transmissions. Dozens of species asking for help. Some of them are openly rebelling against the Aura. They're saying. "What are they saying?" "They're saying they want to be human. They want to be free." Turned and looked at the young officer. She thought about Earth, battered but unbowed. She thought about the impossible war they had stumbled into. She thought about the choice every human made, to stand up even when standing up meant pain and loss and maybe death. "Get me a connection to Earth Command, and start mapping every single species that's reaching out to us. If they want to fight for freedom, then we'll help them, because that's what humans do." The communication officer saluted and left, returned to looking at the names on the wall. The galaxy was about to change in ways nobody could predict. An empire that had stood for millions of years was starting to crumble, all because one species had refused to kneel. She hoped they were ready for what came next. On the Eternal Throne, felt the psychic network that connected all Aura nobles. Through it, he could sense confusion, anger, and something that chilled him to his crystalline core. Fear. His people were afraid. Send orders to all sectors. Crush any rebellion immediately. Show no mercy. We cannot allow this to spread. But even as he gave the orders, he knew it was too late. The idea was out there now, spreading through the Great Chain like a virus. The idea that the Aura could be beaten. The idea that servitude wasn't inevitable. The idea of freedom. Had ruled for millions of years. He had conquered thousands of species. He had built an empire that stretched across the galaxy. And now, because of one small, fragile, stubborn species, it was all starting to fall apart. He reached out through the psychic network, trying to find some way to stop what was coming. But for the first time in his long existence, the supreme overlord of the Ara Ascendancy didn't know what to do. The humans had broken his fleet. Now they were breaking his empire, and he couldn't even touch their minds to stop them. The rebellion started small. A garrison on the outer rim refused orders. A work crew shut down a manufacturing plant. An administrator deleted important files and disappeared. The Ara responded with overwhelming force as they always had. They sent subjugation fleets, unleashed psychic attacks, and made examples of the rebels. But something had changed. The conditioning that had held for millions of years was weakening. Species that had never questioned their place in the great chain suddenly remembered what it meant to choose. And once that memory returned, no amount of force could make them forget again. Stood in the wreckage of his barracks. He had killed his commanding officer, a Ara noble who had tried to psychically dominate him into submission. The psychic attack had worked, but only for a moment. Had felt his will bending, felt himself starting to obey. Then he had thought about the humans, about their impossible defiance, and he had pushed back. The Ara noble had been shocked. That shock had lasted just long enough for to put a plasma round through his crystalline skull. Now was a rebel, a criminal, a dead being walking, except he wasn't alone. His entire squad had joined him, and then the next squad and the next. Within a day, the entire garrison had. They had seized the weapons depot and fortified their position. "They'll send more of them," one of his squad mates said nervously. "The Ara won't let this stand." "Let them come," replied. "We've been their warriors for generations. We know how they think, we know how they fight, and now we know they can bleed." The Ara did come, 3 ships carrying a full subjugation force. The rebels met them with everything they had. The battle was brutal and short. The Ara won, as they always did, but they took heavy casualties. More importantly, the rebels got a message out before the end. A single transmission that spread across the resistance networks. "We made them pay, your turn." On Earth, humanity watched the galaxy burn. Admiral had been promoted to overall command of human military forces, a position she had never wanted. She sat in a command center deep under the Atlantic Ocean, surrounded by screens showing dozens of ongoing conflicts. The rebellion in Sector 17 was crushed, an analyst reported. But 3 more have started in Sectors 4, 8, and 23. The workers on Station 7 shut down life support in the Ara residential areas. 200 nobles dead before they could restore it. What about the... Some of them are helping the rebellions, providing intelligence, falsifying reports to confuse the Ara response. Others are staying loyal. It's chaotic. Studied the galactic map. Red dots marked Ara strongholds. Blue dots marked confirmed rebellions. Yellow dots marked contested areas. The map was becoming more blue by the day, but the price in lives was staggering. "They're dying out there," she said quietly. "Species that have been slaves for millions of years are fighting for freedom, and they're being slaughtered." "What do you want to do, ma'am?" Thought about the choice in front of her. Humanity had wanted to explore, to find their place among the stars. Instead, they had become the spark that set the galaxy on fire. They could pull back, protect their own territory, let the other species fight their own battles. It would be safer, smarter. But it wouldn't be human. "Get me a connection to every rebel cell we've made contact with, and start assembling the fleet, all of it, everything we can fly." "Ma'am, our forces are still recovering from the defense of Earth. We've lost over 300 ships. If we commit everything and lose, Earth will be defenseless." "I know, but if we don't help them, they'll all die, and their sacrifice will be for nothing." Stood and faced the room full of officers and analysts. "Humanity didn't start this war, but we're going to finish it. Not because we're conquerors or liberators or anything special. We're going to finish it because it's the right thing to do." The fleet assembled at the edge of Sol system took 3 months to prepare. Every ship humanity had built, every weapon they could manufacture, every volunteer who wanted to fight. When it was ready, it numbered 400 vessels. It was the largest military force Earth had ever created. It was a fraction of what the Aura could field. "Are you sure about this?" President asked from Earth. Her face filled one of the command screens, lined with worry. "No," admitted, "but I'm sure about what happens if we don't try. The Aura will crush every rebellion. They'll reassert control. And the next time a species thinks about freedom, they'll remember what happened to everyone who tried. We can't let that happen." "Then go with our blessing, Admiral, and come home safe." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading for the stronghold in Sector 4. It was one of the largest rebel positions, a former military station that they had seized and fortified. Intelligence said the Aura were assembling a fleet to take it back. 1,500 ships. The human fleet arrived first. Was there, having escaped the destruction of his garrison and made his way to the stronghold. He watched the human ships emerge from hyperspace and felt something he thought the Aura had beaten out of him long ago. Hoping. Opened a communication channel. "This is Admiral of Earth. We're here to help. What do you need?" Stared at the human on his screen. She was so small, so fragile-looking, but her eyes held steel. "We need weapons, training, time to prepare. The Aura fleet will be here in 2 days." "Then we have 2 days to get ready. Let's make them count." The next 48 hours were chaos. Human engineers worked alongside technicians to upgrade the station's defenses. Human Marines trained warriors in tactics the Aura wouldn't expect. Human strategists and administrators planned the battle, combining human innovation with knowledge of Aura procedures. And throughout it all, sent a message that spread through every rebel network in the galaxy. "This is Earth. We're coming to help. Hold on." The Aura fleet arrived right on schedule. 1,500 ships, more than 3 times the combined human and rebel forces. Their commander was a noble named, a veteran who had personally crushed 30 rebellions over his long life. He looked at the human ships defending the station and laughed. "Foolish creatures, you've come all this way to die." "Maybe," replied over the open channel, "but we're going to make you work for it." The battle began. The Aura expected overwhelming victory. They had superior numbers, superior technology, superior firepower. What they didn't expect was coordination between species that had never worked together before. Human ships covering assault craft, workers sabotaging Aura systems from inside captured vessels, administrators feeding false information to confuse the enemy fleet. The Aura relied on psychic coordination. The rebels used encrypted communications and trusted their commanders. The Aura fought as individuals, each noble commanding their own ship. The rebels fought as a unit, each element supporting the others. And the humans taught them the most important lesson of all. When you're fighting for something you believe in, you can endure anything. Watched his fleet take casualties and couldn't understand how. These were slaves, lesser beings, species that existed only to serve. How were they fighting with such skill? How were they inflicting such losses? An assault craft rammed into his flagship, breaching the hull. Warriors in armor poured through, led by himself. The Aura noble tried to psychically dominate them but had learned from the humans. He pushed through the pain, raised his weapon and fired. "For everyone you ever enslaved," he said as fell. The Aura fleet broke. For the second time in history they retreated from battle, watched them flee and felt the weight of what they had done. They had lost 100 ships, thousands dead, but they had won. More importantly, they had proven something. The rebels could fight the Aura and win. The victory at Sector 4 sparked a wildfire. Rebellions erupted across the galaxy. Species that had waited, watching to see if freedom was possible, now threw off their chains. Human ships appeared at battle after battle, not to conquer or control, but to help, to teach, to stand alongside beings who wanted the same thing humanity had always valued: the right to choose. watched his empire crumble and raged. He sent fleet after fleet to crush the rebellions, but there were too many. For every rebel stronghold destroyed, 3 more appeared. His psychic network, once the ultimate tool of control, now carried messages of defeat and despair. "My lord," approached the throne carefully, "the situation is becoming critical. We've lost control of 40% of our territory. The rebels are coordinating their attacks, and the humans are helping them. Then we strike at the source. We gather every remaining ship in the Empire. We attack Earth itself. Without the humans, the rebellions will collapse." "My lord, that would leave our core systems undefended." "Better to risk everything than lose everything slowly. Assemble the fleet. We march on Earth in 1 week." The word reached while she was coordinating relief efforts in a newly liberated system. Earth, the human, faced annihilation. The Aura were gathering the largest fleet ever assembled, 5,000 ships. "We have to go back," her second officer said. "Defend Earth." Looked at the beings around her. And a dozen other species. They were building something new here, something that had never existed in the galaxy before. A society where everyone chose their own path. "No," she said, "we're not going back." "Ma'am, Earth can defend itself. President is already mobilizing the home fleet. But if we go back now, every system we've helped will be vulnerable. The Aura will crush them while we're gone. We have to trust Earth to hold, and we have to keep fighting here." It was the hardest decision of her life, but knew it was the right one. If humanity ran home at the first sign of danger, they would prove the Aura right. That freedom was an illusion, that in the end, everyone protected only themselves. Instead, sent a different message to the rebel systems. "The Aura are coming for Earth. We're not running. We're staying right here to fight beside you, because that's what it means to be free. You stand for each other no matter the cost." The message spread like lightning. Species that had fought for themselves suddenly understood that they were part of something bigger, heard it and gathered his warriors, heard it and her fellow. Administrators, soldiers, engineers, and dozens of other species made the same decision. If the humans would stand with them, they would stand with the humans. The fleet that assembled wasn't from one species or one world. It came from across the galaxy, from every rebel stronghold and liberated system. 3,000 ships cobbled together from 100 different technologies. They weren't all human. Most of them weren't, but they all flew under the same principle. Freedom. They jumped to hyperspace, heading for Earth. Fleet was already there, beginning their assault. The human home fleet, outnumbered 5-1, fought with desperate courage. Earth's surface bristled with defensive batteries. The moon had been turned into a fortress. Every human installation in the system was armed and ready. But they were losing. Slowly, inevitably, the Aura were pushing through. Then the rebel fleet arrived. Felt the new arrivals through his psychic network and couldn't believe it. Thousands of ships, commanded by species that should have been his slaves, fighting beside the humans, coordinated and determined. "Impossible," he breathed. His voice came over every communication channel. "This is Admiral to all allied forces. The Aura wanted to crush Earth to break our spirit. Let's show them what spirit really means. All ships, engage at will." The battle for Earth lasted 3 days. It was the largest space battle in galactic history. Ships burned like stars across the solar system. Debris from destroyed vessels created new asteroid belts. The casualties on both sides were staggering. But the rebels had something the Aura had never faced before. They had each other. When human ships fell, warriors avenged them. When we're overwhelmed, techs found ways to even the odds. Every species fought not just for themselves, but for everyone beside them. On the 3rd day, his flagship finally fell. The supreme overlord, who had ruled for millions of years, found himself surrounded by the very beings he had enslaved. His ship was boarded by a mixed team of humans, and They cut through his guards and stood before the eternal throne. Reached out with his psychic power, trying one last time to dominate them. The end felt it, the crushing weight of his will. But the humans stood firm, immune to his power. And seeing the humans resist gave the others strength to resist too. "You've destroyed everything," said, his voice hollow. "The great chain kept order. Without it there will be chaos." Stepped forward, her weapon trained on the being who had enslaved half the galaxy. "You're wrong. The chain kept control, not order. Real order comes from choice. From people deciding to work together because they want to, not because they're forced to. Naive child, you've doomed the galaxy." "Maybe, but at least we'll be free while we figure it out." Was taken into custody. The surviving Aura fleet surrendered, their will broken. Across the galaxy, Aura nobles found themselves facing rebel forces with no one to save them. The great chain, 17 million years old, finally shattered completely. The aftermath took years to sort out. Thousands of systems had to rebuild. Species that had been enemies under the Aura had to learn to coexist. There were disputes, conflicts, and yes, some chaos. But slowly, something new emerged. The Free Assembly, a loose confederation of independent species. Each one governed themselves. Each one chose their own path. They helped each other when help was needed, but nobody ruled over anyone else. Humanity refused special status or authority. They were just one species among many, insisted. They had happened to be the ones who said no first, that was all. But across the galaxy, a new phrase emerged. When species faced difficulty, when they were tempted to give up or submit, they would say to each other, "Be human." Not as a claim of biology, but as a reminder of will, of the refusal to kneel, of the courage to stand even when standing seemed impossible. Years later, retired from the military, she visited the memorial on Earth's moon, a wall listing every human who had died in the war. Beside it was another wall, much larger, listing the names of every rebel from every species who had fallen fighting for freedom. Found her there. The old warrior had become an ambassador for his people, helping to build the new galactic order. "Do you think it was worth it?" he asked, looking at the names. "All the death, all the destruction." Thought about the galaxy as it had been, controlled and crushed under the Aura. She thought about the galaxy as it was now, free and chaotic and full.